Here we are. Welcome everyone, again, Torah on Tuesdays. Everyone here, everyone joining online. There's a following online, for the record, surprisingly. A bit of background. So, today we're going to discuss about leadership. Obviously an important topic, not just for leaders, but for all of us, because we're all really leaders, in one way or another. We're leaders over, first and foremost, our own lives, because you can live life passively and just get blown around with the winds and taken up with the waves, or you can take responsibility, ownership of your life, and be a leader in your own life. You making decisions, you are looking ahead and making choices in your life. So that's A. Leadership is all the tools that you read about for leadership are really tools for life, because you're leading your own life. And then within the broader circles which we are part of, we're also leaders of our families, in our workplace, friends. There's always times and place where we need to step up to be leaders. And in fact, Judaism believes that each of us has a responsibility to be a leader. Because we're here not just for ourselves, but for the greater good. And so we have a mission here. Our mission is to implement something in the world, have an impact in the world, to influence people, and that all means that in some capacity we have to be a leader. A leader can mean you, one person who you're having a small impact on, you're a leader to them. So today we're going to look specifically at one of the Jewish leaders, Judah, and what made him into a leader. So, two pieces of background information that are important here. Number one is Yehuda became the leader of the Jewish people for eternity, which means when Jacob was on his deathbed, and actually we read about this next week in the parasha, Jacob on his deathbed blesses each of his sons, 12 tribes. And to each one he speaks about their life a little bit, what they've done, and he berates them for certain things, but then also tells them what's going to be of them, their destiny, their heritage, of their tribe specifically. When it comes to Yehuda, he says, Yoducha achecha, your brothers will acknowledge you, you will be the lion, the king, the leader. And in fact, Jewish monarchy was in the tribe of Yehuda, Judah, King David, King Solomon, all the way till tradition has it, Mashiach, the future Jewish leader, will be from the tribe of Yehuda as well. So, royalty, monarchy, kingship, leadership belong to Yehuda. Obviously because in his own lifetime, he displayed leadership qualities. So we want to look a little bit at his life, what we can glean about leadership, that obviously Yaakov saw in him. This is what a leader is all about. That's the first piece of background information. The second piece of background information is the backstory to this week's portion. This week's portion begins in the middle of the story. So the portion of Vayigash. And the first verse is, and Yehuda approached Joseph. But this is the middle of the story, which goes back that the brothers hated Joseph. There was a real sibling rivalry. For whatever reason, they wanted to kill him. Right? To the extent they literally wanted to kill their brother. That was their plan. They already planned it out. They plotted it. This is how we're going to do it. They ambushed him. Reuven, the oldest brother, he says, let's not kill him. And he had a plan to save him. He says, let's throw him in a pit. Eventually, they sell him to a band of travelers who take him down to Egypt. He becomes a servant in Potiphar's house, one of the royalty in Egypt. And his fate goes from, tragedy to tragedy. After all he's been through, he's then accused of rape of Potiphar's wife, and he goes into prison. For 2 years, he sits in prison in a dungeon. He hasn't seen his family for years. He's cut off from everything he knows, from society he's familiar with. He's an outsider, he's a stranger, and he's sitting in prison. And in prison, he meets these two people, and he asks them, why are you down today? What's going on? Why are you so sad? Imagine in prison, you're asking these people that. But he obviously cared for them. And they tell him, one was the Pharaoh's butler, one was Pharaoh's baker. They were both thrown in prison. And they had a dream. Each one had a dream, and he interprets their dream. He tells the baker, your dream basically means you're about to get executed. He tells the butler, your dream means that you're going to get reinstated into your position. tells the butler, when you get back there, remember me. Tell Pharaoh I exist. Get me out of here. But the butler forgets him. Butler never reminds himself to tell Pharaoh. And according to the Midrash, there's actually a punishment for Joseph not relying on God and having faith in the butler instead of God. Discussion for itself. But eventually, Pharaoh has these two strange dreams. And he has no interpretation for them. Nothing pleases him. All his interpreters, all his stargazers, everyone's trying to give him some sort of reasoning. He can't find anyone. Until the butler remembers, hey, I have a dream interpreter for you. And he tells him about this young Jewish boy sitting in prison who knows how to interpret dreams. 2 out of 2. He had a good track record. So Joseph is called from prison to Pharaoh, and he interprets his dreams. He tells Pharaoh there's going to be 7 years of plenty. There's going to be plenty of food. The crops are going to grow amazingly. But then 7 years of famine. And then Joseph adds, here's what you have to do. During the years of plenty, you have to stock up as much food as you can. Impose a tax on the Egyptians. That way you'll have food to ride out the 7 years of famine. Pharaoh is so impressed, not only by the interpretation, but he's a man of action. He's already giving him ideas how to implement it. He says, you know what? You are the man for leadership. He puts him as his viceroy, second in command. Vice president, vice pharaoh is Joseph. From the depth of the dungeon to the highest echelons of political power in a moment. And Joseph implements his plan. He puts the taxes on the Egyptians, he builds up storage houses, and he's doing amazingly. This is 20 years since he's been sold by his brothers into slavery. He hasn't heard from them, they haven't heard from him, Jacob hasn't heard from him. There's been no family connection at all. What's going on in their minds, we don't know. The only thing we know is that Jacob is suffering. Joseph was his favorite, he's grieving. What the brothers are thinking, what Joseph's thinking, we have no clue. But now, everyone has to come to the Egyptian government to collect their food rations because there's no food, including Jacob's family. They come down from Israel, they're suffering from the famine, they need to get food. And Joseph, who's in charge of dishing out the food, recognizes his brothers. They don't recognize him. He was young, he was 18 when he left them. Now he's in his mid-30s, late 30s. But he recognized them, they were older. And he plays this game with them. He tells them, you're spies. No, we're not spies. And he accuses them of being spies. You have to come with me. And he arrests them. He starts asking them questions. And they start telling him, yeah, we're not spies. Our father, we have a brother who is left behind, our youngest brother. He says, you know what? To prove you're not spies, you have to bring youngest brother. Now for Joseph, it was a very emotional thing. It was his only maternal brother was Benjamin. The rest of them were Jacob's sons, so his fraternal brother, but from different mothers. So Benjamin had a very special place in his heart, and he wanted to see him. So they went back to Jacob and said, we have to bring Benjamin with us. He says, no. Joseph is gone, right? To lose Benjamin as well would be catastrophic. I wouldn't be able to survive. I'm not letting him go with you. But eventually, the famine gets so bad that they have to go back to Egypt. They have to bring Benjamin with them to get food. And they come to Joseph with Benjamin, and they go through this whole thing again. He serves them a meal, and he takes care of them. But as they're leaving, he plants his goblet, his silver cup, in Benjamin's knapsack. And they walk out of Egypt, travel back home. On the way, he sends his guards, his police, his soldiers after them, and they find his goblet in Benjamin's knapsack. And they arrest Benjamin. Now the brothers are terrified. This was Jacob's worst fear, his worst nightmare, that Benjamin would also be lost. And Yehuda had personally guaranteed that Benjamin would come home safely. So they come back to Egypt with Benjamin, and they're now fighting for his life, fighting to get him back. Yehuda takes the lead. And this is the opening of this portion. It's the longest speech in Genesis. Okay? So usually, the Torah is very concise, right? Most conversations are 2-3 words each, and we're left to figure out and fill in the gaps. What happened the rest of the conversation. Here, we have extended speech from Judah. And he goes on to the whole history. He doesn't know what Joseph is speaking to. He says, what this person of power has done to them. You accused us falsely, and we were so honest. We told you information. We went back to our father. We came here. And all you've done is bad to us, harm to us. And he keeps mentioning, my father will be distraught. How can I do this to my father? He tells Joseph, take me instead of Benjamin. I'm strong. I'm much more capable than Benjamin. You want a slave? You want someone to arrest? Take me. Let Benjamin free. At this point in the story, Joseph is so overcome with emotion. And he can't contain himself any longer. He can't keep the secret going. He can't keep hiding himself. He tells all the Egyptian people, his ministers, whoever there, leave the room. He breaks down crying, tells his brothers, I am Joseph. They're in shock. Can you believe it? They would never imagine their wildest dreams. The brother who they sold to slavery 20 years ago is now in such a position of power, is this person who has been driving them crazy all this time. And he has to prove it to them. The Midrash says he had to show them his circumcision, or else they wouldn't believe him. Because only their family had this tradition. And then they're afraid. Their first reaction is fear. What's he going to do to us? He probably harbors this hatred towards us, resentment. He wants revenge, and now he can get it. But Joseph assures them, don't worry. I recognize I'm in a good place in life. I realize God has brought me here. I was needed. This all needed to happen so I can come to this position to advise Pharaoh to save the economy, to save millions of lives, ostensibly, in Egypt and the surrounding countries. So I recognize it was from God. You have nothing to worry about. The brothers weren't convinced, by the way, although they appeared to be. But later on, after Jacob dies, they're scared again because they think Joseph's only respected him out of honor for his father. So when Jacob dies, they make up a story of Joseph and tell him that Jacob, our father, told you that basically you have to treat us well. But that's the story. And the question here is, why suddenly now was Joseph aroused by this speech of Yehuda? Why now couldn't he contain himself in this emotional drama and had to let it go? Until then, there was a lot of drama, right? Plenty of the brothers were crying and screaming, I'm sure, right? This is going on for years. So what happened now? What did Judah's speech do to Joseph that he couldn't contain himself anymore?
Well, I think he was willing to sacrifice himself.
Okay.
That shows leadership. Let Benjamin go. I'll take whatever punishment. So he was willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of his brother. So
okay.
That had opened up something in Jews.
Good.
Yeah, it showed a lot of tshuva. He's his brother's changed. He recognizes that in him.
Exactly. So let's go back. These same brothers 20 years ago couldn't care less for their brother's fate, right? They threw him away. They wanted to kill him. And the reason they didn't kill him was Judah's doing. You know what he said? He said, what profit do we have from killing him? If we sell him, we make some money. Right? That was the callousness of the brothers.
He was a capitalist.
Well, he's a capitalist, right? Make the most of the situation. But think about it. Even they saving his life was done in this backwards way, so we can make some money. We can gain out of this.
Was it Reuben or Judah that decided to save Joseph and not kill him?
It was both of them at different times. I'll get that in a second.
Oh, okay.
Good point. We'll get that in a second. The difference between Reuben and Judah is a very important point. So what Joseph is hearing now is a 180-degree turnaround. The same Judah who couldn't care for his brother is now putting himself in the line for his brother. Right? The same brothers who threw away Joseph are taking a stand for Benjamin. So the commentaries say something fascinating. Why did Joseph go through this elaborate scheme with the brothers? Why did he accuse them of being spies? Why? So the commentaries say he wanted to recognize, he wanted to bring them to a point of teshuvah, as you said. Teshuvah, repentance, a changed person means you're faced with the same situation again, and you do it differently. That's how you know yourself. That's how others know that you've really become a changed person. So they had he wanted to bring them to a situation where they were faced with the same exact thing, a brother who's been taken away. He wanted to see how they'd react. And when Judah reacted the way he did, he says, okay, game's over. I can undisguise myself, show my identity, because now I've achieved my goal. So his whole reason for hurting them was actually for their good. He wanted to bring them to that point of full teshuvah, of being mindful, of being caring for their brother. I'll tell you something else. Joseph's first question when he reveals himself is, I am Joseph, is my father still alive? Now, Judah's whole speech was saying, my father, he's never going to live through this if Benjamin doesn't come back. How can I do this to my father? So the whole speech was, my father's alive, our father's alive. So why is Joseph asking straight away, is our father still alive? Of course he's alive. That was the whole premise of the argument. So some commentaries say, it's actually a foolish question. He was just trying to get in conversation. You have an awkward moment with someone, it might be a first date or something, and you're like, ask this, a question like, what's your name? Really? Or just trying to get in conversation with them. So Joseph, he tells his brothers, I'm Joseph. And then there's awkward silence in the room, right? Imagine the brothers, they're like, oh God, now what? And so he's like, hey, how's that? That was basically, he was trying to break the silence. But I think there's something more to it. When the brothers threw Joseph away, they knew it would hurt their father. He was Jacob's favorite, right? And Jacob was grieving for 20 years. He didn't know if Joseph was alive or dead, what had happened to him, where is he? It ate away at his heart. And obviously they didn't care about that if they threw Joseph away. And they went to Jacob and says, oh, we found his coat. He must have been killed by animals. So when Yehuda comes forth and says how much he cares for his father, so Joseph says now, maybe not asking a question, is my father still alive? Maybe he's saying, oh wow, my father. He says also my father, not our father. He doesn't say our father. My father is still alive. I think what he's saying is, I always thought that my father is a person to be respected. My father is someone who I look up to. You guys, your father you didn't care about. But now you see that Judah has the same father as him, same respect to their father as he has. So he says, oh wow, my father is still alive. Meaning, we have now the same attitude towards our father. So the brothers become a full circle. But it was specifically Judah who represented the brothers, and he had done the biggest turnaround. First of all, because he was the one that suggested they sell Joseph to make profit, right? And here he was standing up for Benjamin, even if it meant losing himself, right? So it was the exact opposite. But more than that, in between the whole story of Joseph, the Torah interrupts with the story of Judah. And you're probably familiar with the story of Yehuda and Tamar. Judah and Tamar. Familiar with the story?
Judah who?
Tamar.
I'm not sure. I might have heard. I don't remember.
Okay, it's a fascinating story. And I'll tell it in short. Tamar married, Judah had 3 sons. Tamar married his oldest son. The son died. So she married the next son. That's the custom of levirate marriage if you die childless. The next son dies as well. Okay? There's a whole story how they died. But Yehuda was afraid to give it to his 3rd son. You're a cursed woman. What's going on? Exactly. So he sends her away. He says, when he grows up, I'll get back to you. He never gets back to her. Okay? One day Yehuda's traveling. His wife had died. And Tamar hears that Yehuda's traveling, so he dresses up as a harlot and stands on the side of the road, and Yehuda sees her. And Yehuda falls for her. And they have a little relationship. And she asks for payment. He says, I don't have money on me. 4 credit cards, right? Before you had the phone. So he gives her instead his stick and his signature ring. He says, here, hold on to these. I'll send money back to you. Give back my stuff. A little collateral.
And that's her father-in-law, right?
It's a father-in-law. Although, yeah, she's not married to the son anymore, but technically she was married.
Right.
Yehuda sends his messenger to find this harlot and give her some money, get his stuff back. No one's ever heard of a harlot there. No one's ever heard of a prostitute in that city. And he can't find her. he finds out a while later that his daughter-in-law Tamar is pregnant. That's a capital offense because she's supposed to be waiting to marry the third son. She can't marry out in the meantime. So he, as the ruler, as the leader, she has to, the capital offense, she has to be put to death for becoming pregnant. So she sends the ring and the stick to Yehuda and says, whoever these belong to, that's who I'm pregnant from. Which is amazing. Even to save her own life, she didn't come out against Yehuda. And the Talmud learns from here that it's better to face death than to embarrass someone. Right? Incredible. She didn't want to embarrass Yehuda. So she hinted to him if he wanted to take ownership and responsibility, he could. And Yehuda, to his credit, came out and said, Tzadka, she is okay, she's alright, Mimeni, she's pregnant for me. And this goes into a whole discussion that in those days, the idea of Yibum, of levirate marriage, of any relative, either the next child or the father. So therefore, technically, she was allowed to marry to him, and it wasn't an illicit child. Now think about it. Put yourself in Yehuda's shoes. He was the leader, the ruler. He was the chief rabbi at that time, right? And there's this story going around about this girl who's pregnant out of wedlock, this girl who's going to be put to death. And he could easily brush it under the carpet. But instead he gets up at a press conference and says, I am the one that impregnated this girl. That takes incredible guts. That takes real integrity, right? That's incredible. And this is a turning point for Yehuda. Because he was going to put her to death. For he thought he's following the right thing. He's following the rule of law. What he believed, she did something wrong. And his assumptions now are thrown into question based on information that he's being fed. Right? And he had a realization that she didn't do anything wrong. Right? I was the one that did something wrong. I was the one. It's for me. So two things. First of all, the integrity, the honesty that he had to come forward. But second of all, he had this sort of realization in his mind that his own judgment was flawed. His decisions he made based on judgment, there's more information to the story. Right? So this was a mind shift for Yehuda, not to trust himself entirely. Never be too trusting in your own head, your own mind. And it may have changed his mind now on Joseph as well. The brothers really believed, for good reason, that Joseph should be killed, or at least thrown away. Good question. The commentaries offer many, many arguments. But on a general, sort of in broad brushstrokes, they felt that he was a danger to the family tradition. He was a creative thinker, maybe out-of-the-box thinker, and he felt they were all shepherds. They felt just stay away from society, just follow the right path, and it's simple. He was this guy, maybe with different ideas. They felt for the sake of the integrity of the family, just about to amputate one limb.
Do you think that because he was able to prophesize the future or read dreams that they were a little scared of him?
Maybe. But I think they really were motivated by good. The commentaries, a lot of them say, I mean, some not all agree, but a lot of them say this wasn't a jealousy or a hatred thing. They were motivated by legitimate concern, and they felt it's worth sacrificing one for the greater good. But now, Yehuda had this realization that these decisions of sacrificing someone, of being necessary to put someone to death, you have this immense realization that may not be the case. And you almost killed someone for no reason. And he may have changed his mind on Joseph as well. 1 second. Who says that we did the right thing? Who says that Joseph deserved to be killed and thrown away? So, at that moment, he was a changed person. So we see here a number of important qualities of leadership of Yehuda. Number one, humility. That is the key. That I don't necessarily know everything. Right? I'm willing to learn from others. I'm willing to say I was wrong. It's not a weakness to have weaknesses. That's a really important thing to know. It's not a weakness to say I made a mistake. It's a strength. And real leaders are able to say that. In fact, in the whole entire Torah, the 5 books of Moses, Yehuda is the only one that we find saying that. I made a mistake. His name, Yehuda, comes from the word Hodah, admittance. Admit his mistakes. Acknowledge, I'm wrong. So that was a quality he had, which is a seminal quality of leadership. Number 2 is taking responsibility. He didn't just say, he could have easily brushed aside this Tamar thing when he found out his signal ring. He could have said, oh, you know what? I found some loophole, she's okay, she doesn't need to be killed. He didn't need to come out and say it was me. But he took responsibility. And we find the exact same thing. When Benjamin is going to go to Egypt and Jacob is going to send him, Judah stood up and said, I am taking responsibility. He says, Avdecha Ari Besanar, I am going to be a guarantor for this child. So not only did he say, don't worry, we'll protect him, he personally took responsibility for the situation. And that's a key to leadership as well. Some people are great people. They can inspire ideas, inspire people, and do great things. But they don't take personal responsibility for others, personal responsibility for situations, and things fall through the cracks. So to be a good leader, to be someone who can really lead people and have position of responsibility, you have to have ownership. No, never blaming other people, only blame yourself. It's all on your shoulders. Obviously, you have to delegate. Obviously, it has to be, you don't do everything yourself, but you feel the responsibility, the ownership and responsibility yourself. That's the second key thing we find from Yehuda in leadership. There's a third very important thing. And this goes back to what you were saying before, Hal, about Reuben and Judah, the difference between them. If we look at the story of Joseph and the brothers, Reuben and Judah both stepped in to save him at different times. So originally, when they planned on killing him on the spot, Reuben said, let's throw him in a pit. And he had planned of later going to the pit and rescuing him. So he originally stopped them from killing him. He says, let's throw him in a pit. He'll die there. He sort of convinced them, let's not murder him in cold blood. But later when the brothers visited the pit, it was Judah who said, let's sell him in order to make some money out of this. So who would you say is the more virtuous? Reuben or Judah? Both of them stepped in to save Joseph, but which one was more virtuous? Reuben, why?
He wanted to spare him, to save him.
Okay.
So he was being, a little sly in his method, but it was to save a life.
Okay. Anyone else want to take a vote? If you think Reuben, raise your hand. Reuben was the more virtuous. Good joke of hands.
Afterwards, he wasn't going to sell him to slavery. He wasn't saying, "Let's make money."
He wanted to actually save him, right?
Right.
He wanted to.
What took him so long?
He had
To what? To get back to the pit.
To go back down and save him?
Oh, good question. Good question.
But we also really need to know the reason why the rest of his brothers were mad. And I'm sure it doesn't have to do with your question, but I'm curious why they really wanted, why they were so mad at him.
At Joseph.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to say about that. So almost a class for itself. The different takes on it. So I'll just briefly say. Some say it was a personal thing, that Joseph was a tattletale and he was always telling Jacob what the brothers are doing, and he was a favorite, and there was this personal.
Joseph's dreams about the brothers bowing down to him.
He had these dreams that they're going to bow down to him, and he was just getting on them. He really was getting to them.
They were jealous of him.
And back in ancient times, what do you do if someone's bothering you? You kill them. Right? This is before, we believe in rights of every individual. Take him out. But others, commentators are more, look at them more virtuous. And either there was legal grounds for his deserving of death, the different things he had committed, or they believed that he was going to corrupt the lineage of Jacob, and they had to sort of get rid of him for the sake of the family. But one way or another, they believed that he shouldn't be around anymore. So, Reuben, those didn't raise their hands. I'm assuming you mean Yehuda was more virtuous.
Yeah.
Explain.
I mean, I think at the time, in those days, to be a slave was to survive. What's Reuben going to do? He's going to get him out of the pit, and then where's he going to go? So in order to survive in those days, you have to be a slave. If not being part of a tribe.
Yeah, but selling him to slavery meant that he could get killed along the way, wherever he was going. It meant giving him to an unknown versus putting him someplace where at least he controlled where Reuben controlled the area, right?
Well, and Reuben was deceiving
His
The
other
brothers.
Yeah.
Judah.
Right.
But when,
It's because he was going to release him from the pit. It was like his own little sly
Right.
plan.
Okay.
I thought he was
So
being
that's not very
smarter.
virtuous.
But Yehuda would
Yes,
be
it is.
deceiving too if he
To
was
save someone's life.
gonna put him
Yes.
into slavery for.
Yeah, well, lying to someone. I agree with Hal
A
there.
lot of manipulation.
I think it's virtuous to lie to save someone's life.
Yeah.
So, good question. Who's more virtuous? Huh?
Nah.
So, when it comes to the blessing that Jacob gives the sons, he tells Reuben the following. He says, you're the firstborn. You were supposed to be the most powerful of the brothers and the leader. But because of things you have done during your lifetime, and he mentions a couple of incidents, it's taken away from you and it's given to Yehuda. Now, it seems that in general, they're overarching in their identity, in their personalities. Yehuda was seen to be the more virtuous over Reuben. And it's given to Yehuda because he saved Joseph's life, amongst other things, and the Talmud. Reuben also saved Joseph's life. So Yaakov is telling his sons that Yehuda gets the credit for saving the life, which means he's the more virtuous over Reuben. And here's a fascinating idea. Who asked this before? Where was Reuben, right? What took him so long? Why wasn't he there in the pit when it came to sell him? So the commentary said, the Midrash says, Reuben had committed this sin years ago. What it was is unclear. He had moved his father's bed. The text seems to imply he slept with one of his father's wives. But Rashi, based on the Talmud, says he meant that he changed around the sleeping pattern of his father. And he regretted that, and he was doing teshuvah. He was in this process of self-reflection, of self-betterment. And at the time, after they threw him in a pit, he was fasting and praying. He was doing his thing. His spiritual meditations.
Who?
Reuben.
Okay.
To make up for that sin, for years he had spent hours a day in this sort of cleansing process. Atoning. So that's why he wasn't there at the time. So, if you look at the two people, technically Reuben was the more virtuous person. He wanted to save Joseph entirely. Right? He had the better intentions. Judah was only after his own benefit. But who got the job done? Even after Reuben sent him to a pit, he still would have been killed. Right? He still would have been killed by their brothers or died there by scorpions, wherever the snakes biting him in the pit. The end of the day, who ensured, who the one that made Joseph go from death to life was Yehuda.
Got the job done.
Whatever intentions were, it's irrelevant. You can have the worst intentions, but if you get the job done, if you have that impact, the impact is there. So here's another key element when it comes to leadership, and especially the monarchy, that the ultimate leadership, right? The king had absolute authority. They say authority corrupts, and absolute authority absolutely corrupts. So he was going to have absolute authority as a king in his dynasty, his legacy. When it comes to leadership, and this is life as well, the intentions are of course important. Who you are as a person, becoming a better person inside, emotionally, mentally, really, really, really important. But who's it important to? To you. That you are a better person, that you have grown, you're mature, that you have emotional depth, you have, intelligence. That it makes you a better person. It doesn't help anyone else in the world. what you do in actuality, what happens, what your behavior shows, that's what makes an impact. That's what makes a difference to other people. So Reuven, he was working on himself. He was atoning for his sin. He was fasting. He was praying. He had the best intentions to save Joseph, but it didn't do anything. Joseph was still going to die. Yehuda, he may not have been the best person at that stage in his life, but what had to happen, happened. He made sure Joseph didn't die. Right? The same thing with Thomas' story. Was he the most noble person in Thomas' story? No. Doesn't reflect very well on him, the whole story. But at the end of the day, he stood up for what's right, and Thomas didn't die.
Well, something that struck me in this conversation, where I've had sometimes experiences like this, where Judah wanted to save his brother, but if he simply said we shouldn't do this, the brothers would say, no, we're going to do this, go away. In other words, he might have just come up with this simply as an excuse for the other brothers to save him. He may have known that, yeah, it's terrible. Selling into slavery is terrible, but it's the only way there is right now to save him. So I'm going to appeal to the baser instincts of my brothers so that they'll agree to spare his life.
Perhaps. Maybe he had good intentions
That's
as well.
sort of what, in the course of conversation, this is what comes to mind.
Although he had no idea who these people were and what they were going to do with Joseph. And I don't
But
know.
it was either certain death or maybe a death, maybe a life. You have two bad choices.
Well, he could have done the same as Reuven. He could have said, let's leave him here, and he could have had him, I'll come back here in an hour and take him out.
Or maybe he was less afraid of him.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, if part of their wanting to kill him was because they were afraid of him, afraid of his power in some way, maybe he was less fearful of him and kept him, better to keep him alive. I don't know.
Okay, maybe. But the bottom line is, Joseph was saved because of Judah. And so, this is what Yaakov tells his sons on his deathbed. He says, Reuven, great guy. You achieved a lot in your lifetime. But leadership isn't for you. To be the head of the Jewish people, to be in the position of power, of responsibility, of taking charge, we need doers. People who get jobs done. Not people who are spiritual, not people who have the best intentions. They tell a story. There was this massive fire broke out in this factory. And all the fire engines came from all different stations around, and the CEO, the head of the company, runs in from in pajamas in the middle of the night. He says, "Guys, in the middle of the factory, let everything burn. There's a safe there with our secret recipes for our stuff. I'll give $100,000 to any fire station that can rescue these from this fire." And they're trying to massive blaze. They can't get near it, and all the engines, more coming. He says, "You know what? $200,000 I will give to the fireman who manages to put this out and save those documents." Nothing. Suddenly, everyone sees this fire truck coming from nearby town. It's a Jewish volunteer fire service. Everyone in their 60s, elderly people. And the fire truck is zooming, rushing towards the fire. No hint of stopping. And it goes right into the fire, drives through in the thick of it, right in the middle of that factory. And a real valiant effort. These people are fighting and fighting. They manage to get the fire out. So this head of the company is so thankful. He says, "You know what? I'm going to give $500,000 to you guys. But I have one question. How do you do it?" And so they say, he says, "I have one question. What are you going to do with the money?" He says, "First thing I'm going to do with the money is fix the brakes in our fire truck." They had no intention to say, but you know what? They got the job done. And that's what Yehuda showed in his capacity in the story of Joseph. And the same thing happened here right at the end, where he put his foot down took responsibility for Benjamin, put his foot down, and he took ownership of the situation, and he took action. All the brothers were there. No one spoke up. He spoke up forcefully to the head of Egypt. So he got in the thick of it. And that's a leader. We see this one more time in the parasha. It's a very beautiful midrash. That right after the brothers reunite, of course very emotional, but the most emotional was for Joseph and Benjamin. There's never any politics between them, right? Never anything dividing them. They were full brothers and had a very unique relationship. And right after they meet, the verse says that they hugged and they cried on each other's shoulders. Sounds reasonable enough, right? Mm-hmm. But the Midrash picks up in the wording there. It says there's more to it than just emotional outbreak. And the Midrash says, and Rashi quotes this, and he says, I'll see in a second.
Is all that Judas speech?
Sorry?
Is all those pages Judas speech?
No, it's earlier. Here. He says, he fell on Benjamin's shoulder and cried, and Benjamin cried on his shoulder. So Rashi picks up on this and says, they were crying on the two temples. Joseph was crying on Benjamin's shoulder for the temples that are going to be destroyed in the area allotted to Benjamin. And Benjamin was crying on Joseph's shoulder on the temple in Shiloh, which was in Joseph's area of Israel. So they're crying on the destruction of the future temples. And each one was crying for the temple that will be destroyed in his brother's area. So, it's a beautiful Midrash, obviously. But the Rebbe has a question. He says, why were they crying only on each other's temples? Temple being destroyed is a calamity for everyone, right? It was a national tragedy. So why was Joseph crying on Benjamin's loss, so to speak, and Benjamin crying on Joseph's loss?
Maybe it wasn't that personal. Maybe it was more conceptual.
Okay. Anyone else? Any ideas? There was a fascinating insight here, which is profound. It says, on the loss in their own areas, they had to take responsibility for. You don't cry. When do you cry? When you're helpless. So you cry. You're hurt. There's emotional pain. Is something in your own backyard, something in your own area of responsibility, you can't cry. Take action. Do something about it. So they couldn't suffice with just crying over their own temples. Their own temples, obviously this is figurative, right? The temples happened 1,000 years later, and this is something, totally not related to them personally, but conceptually. In Joseph's jurisdiction, whatever issues going on there, you can't complain. Don't cry about it and sigh and say, oish, let's pray. Action. What can I do to stop this? Get up in the morning. What am I going to do now to make things better? Someone else's issue. Something going on in someone else's life that I can't change. You can pray for them. Cry for them. Be there for them. When I have an issue I'm struggling with, if I have an emotional issue I'm struggling with, a relationship I'm struggling with, something going wrong in my life, I shouldn't just sit back and say, oh wow, oh no, and sigh about it and complain about it. I have to do something about it. It's the wrong reaction. It sounds like you're so pious. Look at that prayer. Look at those tears. But it's false piety or it's misplaced piety. Now you've not have time to cry. Go and do something. Take action.
How come you can't have both? Like you have a moment of, when things happen, it's not like you make a decision. Am I going to cry or am I going to go into action? Life is so spontaneous. And if I'm present, I look in the wake of my life and geez, the waterworks come out. There's plenty to cry about. But action, I don't think there needs to be such a delineate,
right.
like a very, like the disparate experiences. They could be one experience. Lamentation first, and then action. The emotive deluge, and now it's cathartic, and now I'm open to
You're right, there is a place for that. But it can't suffice for that. Meaning, it can't be, this is not my reaction. It's part of the reaction, but my reaction isn't the crying, isn't the tears. The tears maybe is the first step to be able to take action. But what's my response to this issue, this struggle I'm facing? My response can't be tears. My response has to be action. Even if tears come naturally, which is fine and may be helpful. Right? But essentially, tears aren't a solution. But someone else is struggling with something. What are you going to do about it? And if you're in a position to help, that's in your backyard, part of you. But if someone else is struggling with something you have no power over, you're not in a position to help them with, or you've done all you can to help, then you can cry. Then you have permission to just do what you know, feels pain.
What did Judah do?
So he's not, in this encounter, he's not sort of included. I don't know how it fits in, but
Was Judah, Reuben, and Joseph full brothers?
No.
no,
Just
Reuben and Judah were.
Oh.
Joseph and Benjamin were. So there were 4 wives, 4 mothers. Leah had 6 sons, and the other 3 had 2 each.
Uh-huh.
So that's 12 altogether.
4 wives.
Yeah. So to bring it all together, to sum up, Yehuda earned the leadership, which is also another important point, by the way. Leaders aren't born leaders necessarily. Some people may be born leaders. But most leaders work on themselves, become leaders, right? It's something you grow into. You work on yourself to become that. Reuben was born a leader. He's the firstborn. He's a natural choice for leadership, and he lost it. Yehuda had to earn it. He had moral failings. Originally, he wanted to sell Joseph for money. Originally, he left the family to go marry somewhere else. He went and slept with Tamar. But he turned himself around, and he gained a reputation. He earned his position of leadership. And we learn 3 key ingredients of leadership from Yehuda. Number 1 is taking responsibility and ownership. We see that with Tamar, he took responsibility. We see that with Benjamin, he took responsibility. So towards the end, that's when he felt responsible. Number 2, he had the integrity and honesty, humility. And number 3, action. Getting the job done is more important than your intentions. For a leader, it's to make things happen. And we all can think of, how we're leaders and how we want to be leaders, and dream of maybe becoming big leaders. But think of it in a real way in life. Not as leadership, but as leadership of your own life. And each of us are going through something different in life and are in different positions in life. But take these 3 things and say, how can I implement them in taking control of my life in the right direction? How can I, be more humble and accepting of fault and learning and realizing I'm wrong, admitting my failures? How it's very hard to call someone and say, I'm sorry I did this, right? I made a mistake. Usually we perpetuate that mistake. We just defend ourselves, and we build these elaborate things around ourselves to protect ourselves, instead of becoming vulnerable and saying, I was wrong. I'm a better person, I'm learning from that. And the next thing is taking ownership, responsibility. It's so easy to blame everyone else around ourselves for who we are and where we are in life. And often it's true. I can blame people. There are plenty of people I can say, well, yeah, this guy messed me up, and because of him, because of her. But at the end of the day, it doesn't help anyone. To take control of your own life, to be a leader in yourself, is I am taking responsibility. First and foremost for myself. I'm owning my own life. I'm going to say, manning up, I'm in control. And responsibility for others as well. Help others out. Feel responsible for other people. And number 3 is, the most important thing always is, follow through, action. You can have the best plans, the best, I'm building this Fortune 500 company in my head, but I never once put my hand where my mouth is. I never once did anything about it. You're not going to make money, right? You can have these great ideas in how to help people and how to mend your relationships, and in your head 5 times you went over the conversation in your head, how you're going to speak to the person, but you never actually went over to that person and said what you wanted them, right? Nothing's going to happen about it. So to be a leader of your own life, you have to make sure things get done. And even if you're not holding there, even if internally you're still going through a struggle, that's okay. Just do what has to get done. Because Judah wasn't there either, but he saved Joseph's life. So those three are three key elements for leadership and three key elements for us leading ourselves, being in control of our lives.
Nice.
Anyone add number 4?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Anyone anything to add?
So it's taking responsibility, getting something done. What was the third one?
Integrity.
Integrity, humility.
Oh,
To be able to say, I made a mistake. To be able to say, I was wrong.
Wow, impeccable timing, right at 9:30.
What do you know?
You're-
I just want to make a comment about that.